So, afternoon session, we're going to take a deep dive into the wider trade prospects, and then we're going to return to the EU market. So, highly knowledgeable and experienced panel here. I've got my colleagues, Sarah Baker and Steve Evans. They're on our Insights and Intelligence team. So, the work that we do is underpinned by the intelligence that these guys generate. Clever people. It was said this morning they don't get out much, but we like to get them out now and again. Here they are. They're real people. They exist in the flesh. So really pleased to see them here. And they're the people, if you've got questions about market insight and intelligence, they're the people to direct those questions to. And they're around again afterwards if you have such questions. And they're the people that ensure, as I say, that our actions are underpinned by that evidence, so they're an important part of the broader AHDB team. We've got Karen Morgan from the Department of Business and Trade, lots of experience in international markets, and previously the very first agri-food attaché, although I'm not sure we were bright enough to call it that then, agri-councillor, who was based in Beijing, and that role was co-funded by AHDB with Levy Investment and UK government. And then Nick von Westenholz from the National Farmers Union. And I've got a couple of virtual guests, and the AV is running really well at the moment, no hiccups, Andrew. Don't let me down. So we've got Will Sermon, who's one of the new agri-food attachés. He's based in the in the British Embassy in Washington DC. And we've also got a short video from Ted McKinney, who is the former Under Secretary of State for Agriculture, so in the US. So he's very interested in UK-US relationships. So we'll hear from Ted as well within this trade session. So as I say, video pre-records will weave in throughout the next hour. So I'm going to ask my panel to introduce themselves and say a few words about what they do, what their role is, and before we go into the broader discussion. So, Sarah, we'll go in that order.
Thank you, Phil. I'm delighted to be here this afternoon, not least because, as Phil says, I'm not allowed out much. Here to talk to you about the market prospects, the global market prospects for red meat. Amongst other things, my role as Head of Economics involves analysis of upcoming trade deals and economic modelling of FTAs, as well as the in-depth analysis of potential markets and future markets across the globe.
Thank you, Sarah. Steve?
Yeah, hi there. I'm Steve Evans. I'm the Lead Consumer Insight Manager at AHDB. So I work within the Retail and Consumer Insight team, and we work both domestically and internationally to try and understand what consumers do, how they behave, and the key motivations. So kind of been working with the export team over the last few years to develop our international insight, and yeah, here today to share some of that with you.
Okay, thank you. Karen, do you want to introduce yourself and share with the audience, particularly around your previous experience in China?
Yeah, good afternoon. Karen Morgan. So I head up the team in Department for Business and Trade that covers all of agriculture, food and drink, so the meat sector, but the wider industry as well. And we lead essentially on all of the work that government does to support exports, plus investment into the industry as well. And it isn't like there haven't been a fair few changes in government recently, so just to briefly explain, Department for Business and Trade is effectively a new government department that pulls together all of the domestic support for business with all of the work we'll be doing on international trade, so it's domestic and international. And just very quickly, while we go on, could I ask Michelle, Tim and Izzy are also here in my team if they want to just put their hands up or stand up as well, just so you know we've got a few people here as well. Yeah.
Good to see you in the audience. I noticed you didn't stand up. You'll regret that. Yes, thank you. You'll regret that in 20 minutes. Thanks, Karen. And Nick.
Good afternoon, yes. So Nick von Westenholz, I run the NFU's international trade policy work. And actually after the EU referendum, we set up a specific unit within the NFU to manage some of the impact of the referendum vote, including the fact that the UK was going to take on its new independent trade policy, and that was going to be a hugely important part of the government's work over the last few years, which it has been. So my team has focused particularly on the government's FTA programme, its free trade agreement negotiations, of course, and that has dominated a lot of the discussion around trade policy over the last few years, but also the all-important relationship with the EU, which we're going to hear about in a bit, and increasingly we've been focusing on exports and how we grow export markets for the benefit of UK farmers. We published our export strategy last year, which was snappily called 30-30-30 plus, but that is about growing our exports by 30% up until 2030 to a total of over 30 billion, and that's all agri-food exports. So figure is around trying to get it up from around 25 billion pounds to 33 billion pounds. So that's our ambition. We published a specific red meat export strategy at the time as well, and very pleased that already some of the things we recommended there are coming through. The appointment of the attaches or the councillors, which we've heard from and heard about already today, really important part of what we hope we can achieve in future. And also the establishment of the Food and Drink Export Council. I know Ian Wright, the chair of that's here, or certainly been here today. I sit on that, and there's a number of members of the council here today. So it's really encouraging, actually. There's an awful lot, it feels, in the last couple of years that is beginning to happen to really improve our agri-food exports and work with AHDB in particular and support and bring on the work that AHDB does as well.
Yeah, thanks, Nick. I think, and this is part of that kind of story. We're at a bit of a moment now with moving exports forward onto the next level. So, hence today's event, hence all the other things that are going on around it. So there is a kind of super enthusiasm at the moment to try and push on forward. So you mentioned there the agri-food councillors, the agri-attaches, and I said Will Sermon is in the Washington Embassy, newly arrived there, and I asked the same question to Will. Tell me about your role. This is where I hold my breath for a second.
Yeah, thanks, Phil. I've worked in and around the agri-food sector for nearly 20 years. I started in the private sector before then moving into the Animal and Plant Health Agency as an inspector, working on farm and at the border on import and export controls. I then moved into policy making, both with the European Commission and then with the British government, focused mainly on animal and plant health and food safety. And then in February of this year, I took up my new role here at the British Embassy in Washington, serving as the UK's agriculture, food and drink attaché to the US. In terms of the role, I would pick out three key aspects. And not by design, but they are the three Ps. So it's policy, promotion, and public diplomacy. So on the policy front, this is really around understanding and influencing the development of relevant policy and its implementation here in the US, including where opportunities arise, breaking down non-tariff market access barriers, but also preventing those barriers from arising in the first place in order to maintain existing access. But I'm keen not just to look at gaining market access, but also on facilitating trade. So ensuring that exporting agri-food into the US is as smooth and cost-effective as possible. So for example, at the moment, I'm working with DEFRA and USDA on advancing a digital health certification solution. So that's policy. Then on promotion, well, having gained access, we need to ensure that we capitalise on it. And a good example of this at the moment is UK sheep meat. And with AHDB and the Department for Business and Trade, we've been working hard to ensure that we can grow demand for our world-class lamb here in America. And then finally, public diplomacy. Well, in order to be effective in advancing our trade agenda, it's important that I build strong relationships with US counterparts. And this needs to be at state level, at federal level, but also with membership organisations, whether that's the National Cattlemen's Beef Association, the American Farm Bureau, or the National Association of State Departments of Agriculture, because they have a very loud voice here. And so having them on side is essential.
Okay, so that's Will in the Washington Embassy. So he's one of those new agri-food attaches you've heard lots about. Really positive move by UK government to put those positions in place. Clearly, Will's going to talk specifically about the US market because that's the market he's concentrating on. We heard from Ella Beckett earlier in China, Lorna Burdanova, I can just about see, she's the Middle East attaché. They'd all have similar objectives tailored to their market. So as I say, really positive effort to support the growth of exports in their respective regions and really try and break down some of those barriers and challenges. So that's good. Will does a great presentation, and I particularly like the way there's a few milliseconds between the audio and his lips moving. That's quite a skill. So I'm going to invite now Sarah to the stage. She's going to just do a short presentation and then be followed by Steve to do likewise.
Thank you, Phil. Yes, a very brief presentation from me. So as I've already said, I'm Sarah Baker, Head of Economics at AHDB, and I work across the Economics and Analysis team. And I'm here really today to introduce the Horizon series, which analyses the potential market impact of recent and ongoing trade agreements. So if you look at our back catalogue, the UK's stated ambition to become a great trading nation is progressing, with free trade agreements being negotiated and finalised at a brisk pace. To date, free trade agreements with Australia and New Zealand and the UK's accession to CPTPP have all been agreed. In negotiation are FTAs with the Gulf Cooperation Council, Israel, Mexico, India, Canada, Greenland, Switzerland and Singapore. Trade deals create both opportunities and challenges for UK producers of agriculture and food products, and potentially create increased competition in the domestic marketplace. The effect of trade deals, such as Australia, New Zealand and the US, have been examined in detail by AHDB in previous Horizon publications. We work with a range of internal and external experts, including Harper Adams University Trade Modelling Team, to gain insight for UK producers and exporters into the changes in market dynamics that these trade deals may bring. We examine not only the initial impact, but we also look at the what-if scenarios. What if things change? And we all know in this current climate how rapidly things can change, the unknown unknowns coming up to bite us, to produce a range of likely outcomes and unlikely outcomes. This is aimed primarily at our levy payers to identify the key opportunities and threats that may result from each trade deal. Today, my main focus, and you'll find it in your programmes, is the global opportunities that exist or will emerge over the coming decade. The ongoing expansion of the middle classes in emerging markets across the globe is shaping demand for protein and imported foods. Over the next 10 years, the Organisation for Economic Cooperation and Development, in collaboration with the United Nations Food and Agricultural Organisation, has projected that combined total imports of beef, lamb, pork and dairy will grow by 16%. The UK is well placed to participate in this growth, and our consumer insight analysis, which my colleague Steve will present shortly, demonstrates that the British brand is very well regarded globally and is associated with quality, safety and provenance. Importantly, how the UK can best capitalise on these emerging opportunities is the key question. First, those opportunities need to be identified, and the AHDB analysis aims to pinpoint where these opportunities lie. We must also examine carefully how our major competitors target, manage and develop their key markets. The fact that the UK is not a low-cost producer and is unlikely to become an exporter of bulk commodities at any time shouldn't discourage us from promoting UK produce across the world. It's not over-ambitious to expect, as Nick has just said, to increase that 3.6 billion that Speaker spoke about earlier of red meat, pork and other animal proteins, including dairy, being exported at this current time. The importance of exports to primary producers cannot be underestimated. It helps balance supply and demand and maximises the value of particular cuts of meat. This helps drive overall carcass value higher by maximising returns on every part of the animal, as well as providing an opportunity for specialist area and other products. This work is intended to inform producers and exporters of those opportunities and the challenges that need to be addressed, and to inform policymakers and trade negotiators regarding the economic potential in particular markets. It is available on our website. The website address is in your programmes, and I strongly encourage you to read the in-depth area section reports that are of interest to you, because there's a wealth of information in there. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Sarah. And now Steve.
Thanks, Phil. As I said in the short intro, I'm the Retail and Consumer Insight Manager, and we look at the trends domestically, but we also look at trends internationally. And the reason why we do that is it's, as in the domestic market, it's true in the international stage, that it's really important that we understand our end consumer needs, how they shop, how they behave, what motivates them. So we use a range of different tools to do that. We have data that we subscribe through Euromonitor on IGD, and that helps us look at the overall consumer landscape in some of our target regions and target markets. We also then overlay this with our own bespoke research, and we've done that over the last couple of years. That helps shape some of the work that we do, not only from an export perspective, feeding some of the intelligence that Sarah's just shared with you, but also to work really closely with the export team to understand what buyers potentially might be asking them for when they're going out to markets. So this market potential is probably not so much around the functional stuff that you saw from WAFA this morning on access. This is around sort of unlocking that market potential. So there's lots of different ways that we do that within AHDB. Looking at the export data is one tool, looking at the trade and policy side of things with Sarah is another. I'm probably talking a little bit around that kind of green bar there, and that kind of gives that international opportunity around understanding the consumer. And that, alongside as the market insight that we'll get out from being out in market, helps complete that picture a little bit more about what consumers might want and need going forward. And that blowing that kind of assumption that do all consumers want the same thing in all markets? And this insight can help us answer some of this. So this journey's been over the course of 2 or 3 years. We started doing country reports to start to look at what's going on in target markets. That's when we look at the markets themselves individually. And we've published a lot of these on the international section of the Consumer Insight, AHDB Consumer Insight pages. But our most recent reports has been over 2 or 3 years, which has actually involved surveying consumers across 4 regions. We've actually surveyed over 25,000 consumers out in the global marketplace about meat purchase decisions, and that allows us to understand what the key drivers are by region, but also when we need to break that out into maybe a little bit more detail for exporters or even importers in target markets. I'm not going to have a chance to share with you all the findings, and I would literally say visit the website, and hopefully we've covered a lot of the in-depth detail there. But by all means, come back to me, and happy to take any follow-on questions. But I wanted to keep this in kind of very top-line format for the sake of simplicity here. Just to get across the 4 regions we cover, you can see that dominance of quality. This was collected through asking people about their purchase decisions when buying meat, what was important to them. We also found that taste and enjoyment, like we do in the domestic market, was particularly important in Europe. We know that price and value is a hot topic for consumers as well, and we're able to capture a little bit about the nuances about how sensitive that is. And the most recent regions research was on the Middle East, and we worked really closely with Awal, and thank you for your help in the survey questionnaire that we've literally got the results back, and we published the research findings last week, and it kind of completes the set really. And it showed the kind of similar trend at the overall sector around quality, but it shows you that importance of halal assurance, which was referenced in this morning's session. And that leads me to kind of like the top overall considerations that I wanted to get across to you today around the consumer. And the first is that the product has a great story to tell, and it's about amplifying those quality credentials. And really that can be a foundation of messaging that we put across the regions. But we also need to drive personal messages, and particularly in Europe, for instance, around those product appearance and taste, and the freshness also was coming through on international markets. But we also need to justify our position. We can't rest on laurels and just say it's a British product. We have to tell people why. And it also helps to justify any price premium that we have. It also found that we need to support those messaging around amplifying production standards and things around animal welfare, production, sustainability. They're all selling points that help us stand out and differentiate from the crowd. But obviously tailoring those towards the target markets where they're most important can also be a critical component for success. And in some markets, it's about a reassurance message. So in Southeast Asia, food safety came out dominant. It was really scored significantly higher than all the other regions. So we know certain stories ourselves about the standards that we have, but also we need to communicate that out to consumers in those target markets. So lots of great positive messages out there, and I think some of the insight here is helping us shape exactly what we should amplify and where. Thank you.
Okay, so thank you both. I mean, that sets the scene for the intelligence work that underpins the actions we take in terms of evidence. And both Steve and Sarah there mentioned the information that's on the website, so please do go and have a look at that or reach out to them to ask your questions. And clearly trade's moved up the agenda, and it's a key thing that government and industry have right at the top of their agenda now. So that liberalisation of trade presents some threats, but also plenty of opportunities, as we're hearing. So for you, Nick, what does more liberal trade represent for your members, and what are the opportunities? How can they benefit from that liberalisation of trade?
Yeah, well, I think first and foremost, we want to make sure that liberalisation is reciprocated. And I think one of the challenges we've had so far, obviously, is that, well, firstly, it's not all about trade deals, but clearly liberalisation, removal of market access, removal of tariff barriers, etc., are primarily achieved through free trade agreements. And of course, the first two we have done with Australia and New Zealand are the liberalisation is primarily on our side because they are open economies with largely liberalised markets. They're already very low or no tariffs on most agricultural goods. So just by necessity, it's a fact that the potential opportunities there are much lower for UK producers and businesses than coming the other way. So it is much more there about challenges than opportunities in what we've seen so far. It's not to say there aren't any opportunities, but they're certainly small. So I think we're quite pleased now that we're moving into a sort of new phase of the government's liberalisation and its FTA negotiation programme, where those deals it's looking at and negotiating do tend to have the potential for more opportunities for UK producers. I should say that, and it was referred to earlier, the importance of market maintenance, not just market opening up new markets and market access. So the EU remains a really important market, for red meat, and it remains a really important market for agri-food generally. So actually, time and effort does need to be spent on ensuring that we can continue to serve that market as well as possible. And clearly, previously we had full access to that market. But outside of that, some of the new trade deals that are currently in play are certainly interesting. I think about the Gulf Cooperation Council, for example, that's up there on Sarah's map. And these are the sort of more interesting opportunities because if you were starting with a blank piece of paper about what a perfect trade strategy looked like for goods, then doing free trade agreements with countries that are large net importers of food and don't generally produce the same sort of food that you produce, it's an obvious opportunity. There are obvious challenges as well in accessing those markets beyond just simple liberalisation through an FTA. But it is those sort of markets that I think are interesting. And outside of FTAs, you know, we heard you mentioned it. Will mentioned about the improvements we've made in the US market, recommencing sheep meat exports, for example. So, you know, all that hard work that goes on outside of FTAs and just liberalisation is really crucial as well. But the last thing I'll say, just to echo again what Sarah said, actually trying to maximise, I mean, not chase markets willy-nilly, you need to be fairly sensible and targeted about where to expend effort, but the more markets you can open up, the more diversity that gives you in terms of supply, and you know that helps domestic producers. It gives them more opportunities. It injects a little bit of tension into the domestic market, and hopefully that additional potential demand stimulates supply as well.
Yeah, that's exactly, you know, Waffa touched on that this morning. Having multiple markets open gives you the greatest opportunity to maximise the value of each and every part of that carcass. So that is really important. You touched on there, you know, US, there's ongoing discussions, but nowhere near any kind of resolution on a trade agreement with the US. And Nicholas said earlier how long it's taken to get beef and lamb over the line. And if we think about beef, it's probably been 10 years. We've got access to the market now, and unforeseen circumstances, because we don't have a trade agreement, there's a quota limitation, and the quota for this year is already full. So you have to balance the risks of trade agreements and the opportunities that it presents. But effectively, at the moment, the US market for us for beef, because of that quota restriction, and we participate in the other country quota, it's not really viable with the additional tariff. So clearly that's something to be addressed through those types of discussions. So thanks for your comments there, Nick. So Karen, as a representative of UK government ambition is pretty clear to grow food and drink exports, to get more people interested and exporting, more businesses, to create that resilience and balance in the marketplace. Do you want to talk about what UK government, what your department is doing to support the exporters in this room and broader food and ag categories?
Yeah, I mean, our job basically is to make it as easy as possible for you to trade. So that's about removing as many obstacles as we can from your path, whether they be tariff obstacles, as Nick's talked about in the free trade agreements, whether that's the non-tariff barriers, which is what the attachés are focusing on overseas, or even whether it be domestic barriers. So we spend a chunk of our time working across UK government to monitor kind of domestic regulation and policies and make sure that they're not in any way kind of holding back exporters. And then the other part of what we do then is to provide as much support as we can to make sure that all of you trading can take up and grab as many opportunities as possible overseas. So trade is doing pretty well. We're at about 25 billion for the whole of the sort of UK agri-food and drink sector, which is a kind of historic peak. We know that obviously inflation is distorting that slightly, but the volume figures are doing pretty well as well. As a sort of more personal objective, I guess, for the team that I work in, a big priority for us is to make sure that this sector is continually visible, to make sure that we keep championing it across government, so that the importance it plays in the food security challenges, the net zero challenges, but also the massive contribution that it makes to the economy right the way around the UK is up there kind of at the forefront of government policy all the time. So we're kind of advocating for the sector all the time. I mean, in terms of the support that we have, so I think the first thing that I've realised last night here and during today is that the capability and resources that we do have probably aren't as visible as I would like them to be yet. But we have, so firstly, my team in London, which creates a strategy. We build relationships with the AHDB, with the NFU, and with a lot of trade bodies and bigger companies. But we have people based right across the UK, so wherever you are operating from, we have local representatives who are kind of go-to international trade advisors right across England, and we also now have teams in Scotland, Wales and Northern Ireland as well who work with the devolved administration. So basically wherever you are, we can give you some advice sort of right directly sort of on the ground. But we also do have a big network overseas, so we have about 100 people who work dedicated, focused on the agriculture, food and drink sector, covering about 100 markets overseas, who are a mix of sort of diplomats who understand the UK system, and then locally engaged people, many of whom who've come from industry and understand the markets there. So again, there's a huge bank of resources there who can help you. And then overlaid on top of that, as Phil said, we've now created this network of agri-attachés who are absolutely laser focused on addressing these market access barriers. And I realised, Phil, I forgot to answer your question earlier, which was a bit about my background. So yeah, this has been going since about 2015, when the AHDB identified that we really did need that bespoke focus on the market access barriers. And the AHDB wanted to pilot that in China first, because it's honestly the market that probably has the most complicated set of barriers, and certainly the longest list if you look at our lists back at HQ. So I was privileged enough to go out there and work in China to do that, and I've been sort of focused on this ever since. A couple of other things I'd say about our resources. So most people are familiar that we provide support for trade shows. We do a lot of inward and outward missions. We've got one coming across to the Yorkshire Show at the moment, which we've co-funded with AHDB, I understand. So we've got a Meet the Buyer activity there. We have outward missions, so we've got one planned for the Middle East and right the way around the world as well. We also have something that I wanted to mention that I think is underutilised, which is our UK export finance. So we have UK Export Finance, which is kind of our credit guarantee agency. So there's direct lines of financing available for exporters who, for example, want to invest in the facilities that they have, that they want to expand their kind of exporting capability. We have loan guarantee processes and so on. So essentially with UK Export Finance, what we're trying to do is make sure that if you have a project and you want to export, that you're never held back by a lack of access to finance and credit. So there's a whole load of kind of export support out there, and really we just encourage you to reach out to us and approach us if you want any advice on that.
Okay, thanks, Karen. So, Sarah, if I can come to you, you put a chart up, a map, which showed where the opportunities or the greatest opportunities lie, and that map's in the your Beyond Borders publication on your desks. You touched on within that discussion the modelling work and the collaboration we have with Harper Adams University. Do you want to expand on that and talk about the parameters they use to measure and look at what those opportunities and risks might be?
Thanks, Phil. There's nothing I like more than talking about economic modelling, so excuse me while I talk to you for 5 minutes or so. We use a network model because we're aware that trade doesn't happen in isolation. So trade is not just bilateral. It often displaces existing trade, or it will shift according to supply or demand shocks across the globe. So we use a network model to see what the impact of removing tariff barriers and non-tariff measures between two particular nations, or two particular, in the case of CPTPP, two particular trading blocs, and the UK will have. And then we look at not just the immediate effects, the changes in trade flows that may result, but we can also look at what-if scenarios. So what if, for instance, when we looked at Australia and New Zealand, we know that New Zealand currently doesn't fill its lamb tariff. So if you remove that barrier, it's not going to have a significant effect. However, if Australia and New Zealand were to lose access to Chinese markets, or particular markets which they send a considerable volume of their output, what would happen then in the global situation? It's not all going to come to the UK, but it will be on the global market, and therefore will have an impact on UK prices. So we can look at it from many different ways using our modelling techniques. We can look at it from, the immediate impact to the 10 years down the line to the what if this were to happen type scenarios.
So just so you know, Sarah holds the record internally for the person that can say CPTPP in the shortest amount of time, because I always have to pause to spell it out a little bit more slowly. So thank you for that. You keep your record. So I'm going to go to another video. I asked Will. We've talked about beef and lamb access. So I asked Will, what are the immediate priorities for his role in that Washington embassy in the US for our products?
Well, I would pick out three. First of all, beef. So there is an ongoing issue at the moment with an other country tariff rate quota, which applies to beef imports coming into the US. And this affects countries which do not have a specific tariff arrangement in place, which includes the UK, but also Japan, Ireland, the Netherlands, and a host of others. Now, outside of this tariff rate quota, beef imports face a 26.4% tariff, which is generally enough to make exporting unviable. The tariff rate quota that's available applies to 65,000 tonnes. And the issue is that Brazil stockpile beef in US bonded warehouses ready to be placed on the market at the beginning of the quota period, largely to the exclusion of most other exporting countries. So last year, for example, Brazil utilised 55,000 of the 65,000 tonnes available under the quota, and it was completely filled by the 28th of March, noting that the quota period only starts on the 1st of January. Now, it has taken slightly longer to fill the quota this year, but it was still exhausted by the 2nd of May. So I'm working closely with the Department for Business and Trade and DEFRA colleagues to design an alternative system to propose to the US Trade Representative and to the US Department for Agriculture, which would ensure a fairer distribution of this quota. And I've been using recent ministerial visits to highlight the issue and press US counterparts into action. Another very helpful lever has been the influence of those powerful membership organisations I've already talked about, which have an interest here, in particular the National Cattlemen's Beef Association and the American Farm Bureau. But I'm also coordinating a joint proposition with Japanese and Irish counterparts who have significant equities in this issue, noting in particular that Japan is one of the biggest importers of US beef. The second priority I'd highlight is lamb. I've already talked about this, but our focus at the moment is very much on supporting AHDB and DBT colleagues in promoting British lamb, a meat which at the moment is not widely consumed in the US and which doesn't currently enjoy a reputation as a high-end product. So there's a piece of work here that we need to carry on with, which is to shift consumer sentiment. About 73% of the lamb that's imported into the US at the moment comes from Australia. And of course, that simply isn't a comparable product to British lamb. And we need to educate US consumers of that. There is a growing demand, though, for high quality lamb from the food service sector and also the ethnic market. And the potential within the retail sector is huge, but provenance is king, which is why it's so important for us to continue to tell the story of how our lamb is produced. And you couldn't wish for better advocates than AHDB. And of course, there's nothing quite like seeing and hearing it from farmers directly. So I'll be helping with inward and outgoing visits too. And then the third priority is something called Proposition 12 in relation to California, or Question 3 in relation to Massachusetts. And in brief terms, these are both very similar ballot propositions, basically referendums, that have taken place in those states where the electorate have voted in favour of stricter welfare requirements, particularly for pork. And the result of this is that it outlaws the sale in those states of pork from farms which don't comply with these new stricter requirements on living space for confined animals, and which also effectively ban the use of sow stalls. So this could present an opportunity for UK pork producers who would already meet these stricter requirements, at least until US production systems are converted into compliance, which could take some time. Now, this decision was appealed to the Supreme Court, who only passed judgment about 2 weeks ago. So I'm continuing to follow this closely and passing along intelligence back to those in the UK with an interest.
So that's played to the audience in this room, so that's great. He also I told him if he wasn't very good, I'd cut the video down. So he started by saying, I'm going to talk about 3 things. Took away my opportunity to do that. But I think that kind of underlines the role of the ag attachés out there, is to really get under the skin of the challenges, work closely with us, NFU, other organisations, you as exporters, and understand what the barriers are and what's hampering your ability to do trade. So again, you know, that's going to be a critical role going forward as we try and unlock that higher value US market. So Steve, thinking about consumers, this is your area, you're an expert in consumer purchasing behaviour. You put up that slide with the tiles on showing quality. So I wonder if you can just say, across the 4 regions that you've looked at, those 25,000 consumers, quality came forward, but how did the perceptions change? And importantly, how does our audience utilise that, and what more can we do in terms of bespoke services to try and take that forward to give the greatest opportunity to create those sales?
Yeah. So when we showed those findings, you'll see there that quality came out top, and that didn't surprise us to start with. So we had planned for that, and we'd essentially asked them a lot more questions about like what drives quality. So what do you mean by that? In particular, what we found out in Europe, a lot of it was around taste and appearance of the product. And actually, when we showed collateral in that market as well, when we showed them visuals, the attraction for consumers when they saw shots of the actual end product and the tasty kind of dish-based shots actually proved really popular. In North America, we find a lot kind of centred around sort of taste as well, but also that kind of freshness, and kind of linking to a lot of the kind of points that have kind of been talked about a little bit today about like that naturalness, and almost kind of talking about what's kind of not in a product as well as what's in a product, but also talking a little bit more about how we sell that kind of quality out there. And in Southeast Asia, food safety was dominant. Not only was it the top of mind with consumers when we asked them what was important to you when you're buying meat, quality was second in that one. It also, when we said, well, what do you mean by quality? They went, well, food safety. And it was very much sort of paramount in kind of Southeast Asia. And in the Middle East, we found a lot of comments around halal assurance, and very much talking about having that kind of trust in supermarkets that they'll stock halal kind of products, but also perceptions that they have of halal. So in terms of the kind of second part of your question, almost about what we could to do more of, well, there's obviously great stories we can tell across all the different regions, but there's also nuances, but also getting consistency with how we showcase and show those products. We're probably all imagining great kind of press adverts or collaterals or product shots we could use. And one of the things on the Beyond Borders document on page 11, in kind of items 1 and 4, talk about marketing support services and also the bespoke advisory. And we think there's a great opportunity here around sort of getting market insight and intelligence alongside marketing collateral that potentially we could offer out to the industry to use. Not take on board that not everyone might want to use the same material, but there's nuances there, and maybe we've got the evidence that underpins some of the decisions, and merging with some of the sort of marketing expertise. So Gareth's at the back, and he's starting to develop this hub, and we're also developing that bespoke advisory kind of stuff, which sits alongside the evidence that we've got. But also, if clients or people want to go further, offering out that opportunity for commission pieces of work, which is more detailed and probably on an individual client basis, that allows them to get underneath the skin of their individual projects. I would sort of say that's at very early developments. We're looking to develop that within AHDB, and by all means, we'd love to hear sort of thoughts and opportunities that you got out there in the market you think could tie up with that. Happy to have a chat.
So if you're interested in a more detailed insight, then Steve's the man for the job, I think. So, great, thanks, Steve. Nick, I know you were in the US very recently, looking at what they're doing and thinking about the opportunity for exports and what that might mean to your members. So can you reflect on what you saw and what you learnt in the US, and then perhaps expand that out a bit further as what other areas or what other countries do you feel present the most opportunity for your members in the broadest sense?
Yeah, we had a great trip. It was split into two. We went to Illinois first and visited some farms, some businesses within the supply chain, some research institutes and the like there, which was incredibly useful because you get a sense of both the differences, and there are very clear differences in production approaches in the States to the UK, but also actually the same challenges we're facing, around things like sustainability, climate-friendly farming, issues over red meat consumption and consumer preferences. And those shared challenges it's useful to understand what the different approaches to those might be. But we then spent some time in Washington, and actually Will accompanied us both in Illinois and Washington, which was great. And I think that's a really important part of what we as an industry need to do going forward, which is direct engagement with our attachés in those markets, explaining to them what's going on back home, what we think the opportunities are, but also listening to him about some of the things he just mentioned actually, and what the big ticket items he's working on. Those three he mentioned were the main ones actually that came up in the discussions we had in Washington, which was with some of the organisations he spoke to, like the National Cattlemen, also with the USDA over there, so government officials, and the American Farm Bureau Federation. So and the British Embassy, where we enjoyed some West Country lamb, which was excellent. It made its way over there successfully, so that was fantastic. But those issues around things like the beef quota, really trying to capitalise on sheep meat access, and the whole issue around Proposition 12, which is fascinating actually, that they are, some of the issues we've experienced here in the pig sector over recent years. It's around animal welfare and standards is suddenly very much on the agenda there. Where there was also quite a lot of discussion around beetroot, but I suspect that won't be quite as much of interest to people in this room. But it was, I think, one of the big takeaways, and you've got Ted McKinney coming on in a bit, and he runs the National Association of State Departments of Agriculture, which is each of the agricultural departments across the states of the US, and he does a lot. We met with him and his team, and it's really interesting because we met with him when he was over here actually not so long ago, and they do a lot of what you would call sort of trade diplomacy, I guess. Yeah. Getting out there, meeting people, shaking hands, understanding what the issues are, putting minds at rest often as well, and where you've got some technical issues like that beef quota, having discussions about that and just trying to inch it along a bit. And that was a lot about what we were doing out there as well. So I think there's massive value in not just AHDB and the attachés and officials from DEFRA and DBT, but industry being out there as well, meeting people, looking them in the eyes, and having some of those really important discussions.
Yeah, we'll get some closing thoughts from Ted in a moment, but as you say, it's that diplomacy, the advocacy, understanding what the challenges are to try and get a similar position. And of course, there's a similar position on things like environment, on meat in the diet, nutrition, etc., etc. So those are shared challenges. And sticking with that kind of theme, I rather unfairly asked Will, given that he's only been there 6 weeks, what else he could be doing. He's not had much chance to think about what he is doing, but so what more can be done in the markets?
Well, as I've already mentioned, I think inward and outward missions are a brilliant way of telling the story of what makes British agri-food so special and truly well-beating. Now, they're hard work to organise, and let's face it, there's a cost attached which isn't insignificant. But done right, with a carefully selected delegation, they can pay for themselves many times over. So I'm keen to see how we can do more of those. For example, AHDB delivered an inward mission to the UK last year in preparation for the market entry of lamb into the US with importers and processors from the United States. And it definitely got them very excited about what they saw. The environment, the heritage, the landscape, alongside high welfare and a fantastic product, meant that they are potential customers going forward. And we need more of this type of activity to grow the sales base. So UK government is looking to partner on this type of mission to support business and trade growth.
That Susan and Susanna raised today about getting overseas buyers into the country so they can see what the story that we have to sell is a really important part of underpinning that sale. But he talked about that's one of the elements, Karen. So in its broadest sense, what other things do you think government can support in terms of opportunities to take us forward?
I mean, that's just the trade shows. They're still a really important part of the whole programme. So, the AHDB obviously has a fantastic presence at some of the really big trade shows, and we try and work with the AHDB to kind of create a programme around that. Nuga, Germany later this year, we've got CL Paris, Gulfood, some of those really big ones. But increasingly also we're looking at some of the other trade shows and some of the newer markets and how we expand our reach by experimenting and seeing what level of engagement and traffic we get at some of the other events as well. I would echo everything on the inward missions. I think there's no substitute for having our buyers see things in situ, going out into farms. I've had Chinese buyers, for example, sat round kind of a kitchen table at a farmer's house before, and there's no substitute for that at all in terms of winning them round. And our competitors are doing it, so that's the key thing. We are there, competing against others for that business. The outward missions as well into market, I think, are really important. For a lot of companies, some markets can be hugely demystified when you're going out and talking to potential buyers and seeing how the supply chain operates in another country. And we try and run those and help people in market, and then try and kind of address some of the particular challenges that you'll face in those markets, whether it be helping you to think through the customs issues or the local labour issues, or helping you think about how you would tailor your marketing in particular markets as well. So there's a whole suite of stuff, but I think we would just always encourage feedback from all of you about what would help, whether it's with marketing or regulation, or any other issues that you're facing. If you let us know, we can try and tailor our support. We do have like a core programme of export support, but at the PM's summit, you saw the PM had a big food summit recently, so he topped up our budget with an extra, in total 4 million, not all for the meat sector, but certainly sort of 2 million for trade shows and missions and things. And we're working with the Food and Drink Export Council, which Phil sits on, Nick and others, to try and shape that and make sure that it's as impactful as possible. But the key thing with the Export Council is it's the partnership. So, Phil and AHDB colleagues have got this amazing market intelligence. You've got buyer connections. We've got the diplomats and others in post, and we're trying to just bring all of that together. So it's like a big collective endeavour to kind of grab as many of those opportunities as possible.
I clearly heard there 4 million all for the red meat sector.
No.
So, thanks for that. I mean, it's great to hear about that collaboration. Of course, we're big supporters of the great brand, and the collaboration is important. And the expansion of all the work, of late is really critical to our levy payers. So, Nick mentioned Ted McKinney. He's the former Secretary of State or Under Secretary for Ag in the US. He's made several trips to the UK. Let's be clear, he's looking at the UK for his members to be able to sell their products here, and it's agriculture in its broadest sense, so it isn't just meat, it's cereals and so on and so forth. So agriculture in its broadest sense. But there's a point here about advocacy and sharing experience, recognising there are both opportunities and threats from that shared trade. So I'll leave the last word to Ted McKinney.
You are at the core of forming a relationship, or reforming a relationship, as I'd say, with the US, with US agriculture. And I hope we are showing that very same interest in you based on the trips we've made to the UK and the facilitation of you and your guests coming here. We are well aware, and we've watched from a distance, the joy from our standpoint. I know there's been pain involved with your Brexiting, but oh my, I want you to know how much we in the US agriculture applaud that. It's not that we dislike Europe, we just dislike some of their policies. And for you to stand on your own 2 feet and be able to represent good, sound, and evidence-based science is a joy to our hearts, and I hope it is to you. There's so much that binds us, I know that, but oftentimes it's agriculture, food and drink issues that separate us. And if we could take that first step to help out, we're all in. And we hope that there's ways you can show some favor to the U.S. as we drive toward what we in agriculture here hope is a free trade agreement of some sort. We've got to get there. We're happy with the interim. We applaud the embassy here in the U.S., DEFRA, and so many others as they do UK to U.S. state deals. Most of those are university research and other things. I know the difficulty of diving into phytosanitary and sanitary issues like animal welfare and all those, but we will get there. And I'll tell you, I think you'll find that our forms of production agriculture are very similar to yours. And I can say that in that our family still has a large farm in the state of Indiana, where for years we've had pork production, corn, soybeans, etc. I also applaud these state to UK deals that are going on. I think they are a statement that we can get going on relationships that go across the board in food and ag, including research. So I'm very, very bullish. And I'm so appreciative that it all started with people like you and AHDB and NASDA, National Association of State Departments of Ag, the group that I lead as their CEO, coming together, breaking bread, traveling to farms and businesses, us to your country, you to our country, and we have got to keep that up so we build and sustain that trust. So call me grateful. I wish you the very best in the events you're doing, and we look forward to the next trek that you might make to the US or that we might make to the UK. It will happen.
So, Ted's the consummate diplomat, and he delivered that EU line with a complete straight face, right? So, that's the challenges they see. The US from the agricultural side has been really positive about, look, UK offers opportunities to them. It's an attractive market. But the point is that it's the policy things that are going to be difficult to work through. So, as we look to the US for opportunities for our beef, lamb and pork, clearly they look, and our dairy products, they look to us for what opportunities we can present to them. So, we are exactly on time. Who bet that would happen, right? So I'd like to thank our video presenters, and particularly the people in the room, Karen, Sarah, Steve and Nick, for interesting and insightful thoughts on potential trade opportunities around the globe. So thank you. Right, I'm going to pause for a moment. I'm going to invite my colleagues here to step on down and invite the European colleagues to get ready in preparation. But I'm going to let a few people escape. If you want to stand up for a moment and stretch your legs, for you to do so. Cheers, Nick. Take care. Thanks for coming. See you. We are on the home straight. Grania, safe home. Bye-bye. Good to see you. You're coming back. You're coming back. You're going. Right, all right. Are you off, David? Good to see you. Jorge. Right. I'm going to shut the door to prevent any more leakage. If we can settle back to your seats. So, you as well. Were you at the back? Come on, off you go. Take care. Right. So we're at the home straight now, and we've had a long journey to get here. We've talked about broader trade agreements, trade in far-flung markets, and so on and so forth. But the European market is a massively important to the industry. It's where the vast majority of the products go. We've been there for a very long time. We enjoy great reputation. And it's those markets that, again, continue to present value and volume outlets for your products. So we have, as AHDB, we have an office in France, and we also have a network of agents from around Europe, thankfully they're all here today to share with you very short insights into their market, but I'd encourage you to reach out to them, make contact, etc. Luis, our Portuguese agent, isn't here today. He's the one that isn't here because he's got activity being delivered. So he has a pass not to be here, but he's done a pre-record because he's actually delivering a trade event today. So we encourage that, of course. But we're gonna work through some short presentations and great faith in our AV colleagues here. I'm going to invite Lucille in the first instance from our French office to talk about the work they do on that market. Lucille.
Thanks, Phil. So my name is Lucille Briot, and I work in the French office south of Paris. Some of you already know me from CIAL and all the other events that we have done together so far. I've been with AHDB for 8 years now. And so we're a 3-people team now in the French office. We used to be 5, we're now 3. So we have myself, I deal with communications. My colleague deals with marketing and in-store promotion. And we have an administrative assistant as well on site. So today I've just prepared a quick overview of our activities in France. Obviously, France, as you know, is an important and mature market. Let's just remember that. So I will just start with a couple of figures, not many because I don't like them very much. But here you go. Those are the figures that I'm going to share with you today. So 22% there, you can see, it's 22% of all lamb consumed in France in 2022 comes from the UK. So that's a huge market share. 31% of all UK beef export last year went to France. That's in value. That's in value. And that's 47% for lamb. So that's big. We're still big. Although, obviously, as we said, many new markets are emerging. It's very important to diversify, but we're still your biggest fans. As was mentioned by Steve before, and many of you as well, well, UK farmers, they provide an excellent product. What we can do for you guys is deliver the story to accompany your product. We bring the story for food service and for buyers in France in general. British produce equals quality. For the general French consumer, Britishness is not necessarily an asset. You'll forgive my saying so. So we need to work on communicating values. So we work on showing taste, we work on nutritional values, sustainability, and all of this. So this is very important for us. This is the different channels. These are the different channels that we use, the different audiences that we address. But rather than just explaining it to you, I'll show you a quick video so you can see what we do. I'll just talk on that video, so please lower that sound and the horrific music I've put on it. Thank you. So here we go. So that's a bit where we are, what we do. So that's us. Obviously, we are aiming at developing all of this. We have more support from the marketing team now, and we're very happy about this. So we will develop strategic activities going forward to optimize our activities. I also just wanted to say thank you because on Monday, the team was on an event in Rungis, which is the largest fresh produce market in the world. And we were on an event presenting British beef, and the meat was gorgeous. It was amazing. And we were very happy and very proud to be there and have people taste it. And people say, oh, what is it? It's UK beef. So, oh, okay. And they were tasting it, and they were just really happy. And this makes our job really enjoyable. So thank you for that great produce you're getting. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Lucille. That's a great example. Carol, I'm going to invite John.
Sorry.
You're too keen. Your time will come. Relax. John.
Thank you.
That's what I like, the enthusiasm. So, thank you, Lucille. John's our representative in the Netherlands. Hand over to you.
Thank you, Phil. And thank you for the opportunity to share some of the work that we are doing in the Netherlands. That was impressive, Lucille, but Holland is a completely different market in relation to France. I'm going to show just a few examples of what we do in the Netherlands, but first of all, I'm going to share a bit of the characteristics of the Dutch market, and that also shows a bit of the challenges that we are faced with in the Dutch market. Meat consumption in the Netherlands is stable for a few years now, despite all the let's say the meat alternative growth that we are experiencing in supermarket retail. But when you look at statistics, consumers still consume meat in the same level as they did a few years ago. So in a way that is quite exceptional. When you look at the quality perception, and that's also a bit different in relation to France, as soon as it has a British stamp on it, consumers, but also the trade, think that it's a quality stamp. So as soon as it's British, as soon as the UK stamp is on it, then the perceivement of the consumer is already that it's quite a good quality. So that is something that we try to capitalize on as much as possible. Within retail, we also have a challenge which is called beter leven, or better life, if you will translate it in Dutch. Retailers almost ban new entrants in the Netherlands, and that's a challenge for UK exporters by the sustainability requirements. It's a sustainability mark, beter leven, and the retailers do demand that mark on the product also in supermarkets, and that's a challenge that we faced with to make sure that exporters also are in compliance with that quality standard, and it's a costly standard. Moving on to more detail with regard to lamb. Lamb in Holland, unfortunately, is still seen as a seasonal product, and that means that consumption is only in spring. It's a tradition from that perspective, and that also means consumption per capita is relatively low, especially when you compare that to Belgium or France or Germany or the UK even. So mostly consumed out of home, so not in home, and of course as a representative of AHDB, I'm trying to push that agenda as much as possible to increase consumption of lamb in home. Local sourcing is also one of the challenges. We've seen a recent project going bust due to the fact that a retailer just demanded the product to be locally sourced. So they replaced UK lamb with Dutch lamb, challenging the retailer with regard to the all-year availability you have from the UK, which is not the case in the Netherlands. But still, with all the arguments that I put on the table, they make that decision. It's quite recent, it's a disappointment, but I'm working hard to make sure that we get that business back. On beef, we're one of the bigger importers of UK beef in the Netherlands. It is unfortunately very much cow-oriented, and it's also cheap and red. Unfortunately, our consumers in the Netherlands almost prefer red meat instead of dark matured meat. It's also in our system or in our tradition. Maybe it's also a bit of the cheap nature that we have in the Netherlands amongst consumers, but that's the situation, and I'm trying to push more towards quality, and that's also where I see opportunities in the future. There's very little focus on breeds in the Netherlands in retail, but also in food service. That's also where opportunities lay. And what you also see in the Netherlands, that a lot of, especially cow beef, is imported just to add value and then moves on to other markets, France, Scandinavia, Germany, even further than that. So there's a lot of processing going on in the Netherlands, and the product doesn't stay here in the Netherlands, but it moves on. And Irish, it's one of my biggest challenges also, is to compete with Irish. If you look at what Borbia is spending in the Netherlands to maintain their position in beef, that's quite a lot. And yeah, I'm trying to make sure that at least I give some action against it to make sure that we gain there as well. Some of the activities that we do, you will see a few names that probably don't ring a bell at all, but just to show you what we do in the Netherlands. Keurslager is a butchery channel in the Netherlands, more than 300 outlets. We're developing a campaign at this moment to launch lamb in Q3 this year. Mind you, just mentioned that lamb is particularly for the spring in the Netherlands, so I'm trying to push that also towards autumn to make sure that that lamb consumption is also expanding. Another thing that we do is we've partnered up with Goat Mio. Goat Mio is, let's say, the equivalent of Michelin, Guide de Michelin. We have a good partnership with them also on promotions, and it works out quite well. And we'll do that all year round. Culiquiz is something new. We try to engage younger chefs also to tap into the quality of British lamb and beef. And the Culiquiz is one of the things that we do to make sure that new chefs also get information on that. Moving on to Horecava, some of you will be familiar with that. It's a big event in the Netherlands in January, where we have a stand and where we represent AHDB beef and lamb and make sure that we have an engagement with chefs and conversations with chefs, have them taste products, and it's also the kickoff, if you will, for the lamb season in the Netherlands at that time. So I invite you all as an exporter also to visit it. So next to the, let's say, international events like Anuga and Sial, we also do local events at the Horecava. Another partnership that we have is with the importer is on West Country lamb. It's with a specific importer. Meat Street is one of the major wholesalers in food service in the Netherlands, and we have developed a campaign together with them on West Country lamb. A recent launch at Hanos, which is a wholesaler also in the Netherlands. Been discussing that already. Launched UK lamb and just started, so it's quite new, and the first signs are relatively positive, but it's one of the things that we do together with you as an exporter, but also with the importer to make sure that we sell more lamb in the Netherlands. The Wheel of Beef and the Wheel of Lamb platform is something that we created to communicate with consumers, but also with the trade. We use that also for social media, and it's a website. It's just a bit more than a website. It's a platform that we use in all our communication to make sure that all the information that is required on our product is being exposed to the people who want to look at it. So that's towards the end. I mentioned already, there are a few direct opportunities at this moment. I was just discussing the Keurslagers campaign that we're developing at the moment. For that, I need lamb, a lean classification of lamb, and I need fresh weekly deliveries to make sure that that product is being sold. And we need some time to allow it to grow into good sustainable business. But there's a big opportunity there. There's also, and I mentioned it already to a few of you, there's also an opportunity for beef, and I would like to focus on single breed. I know that there's a demand for it, and then not the Angus breed, but more, let's say, exotic breeds. You've seen them also mentioned in here, the Ruby Red Devon or Shorthorn or Longhorn. Focus on that particular breed and try to make that work as a more premium proposition in the Dutch market. And I'm certainly convinced that there's an opportunity there. Also there, it's important that there's fresh delivery allowing volume to grow. That's the end of my presentation. I've spoken to most of you exporters already. What I would like to say is from any airport in the UK, it's maybe an hour flight to the Netherlands. Just hop on. We'll make a meeting in the Netherlands. I'll present much more details than what I've shared with you at this moment. And I'm happy to drive you along and make connections with importers, or if you have business already, just to discuss how you could improve that business. That's me. Thank you very much.
Thank you, John. So, great introduction to the Netherlands. Tim, you're going to tell us about the German market next.
Yeah, hello everybody, and also a warm welcome from my side here in London at Export Conference. With respect to the weather, I rather should say a very warm welcome, I feel. My name is Tim Schäfer, and I am the representative for AHDB since 2011 for the German-speaking markets, with the focus on the German market. German-speaking markets comprise Austria, Germany, and Switzerland. So, I feel before I give you some market insights, I have to give you some more details about the special situation in Germany, because a part of the Netherlands and France, we face a complete different situation. One can say Germany is in a crisis mode, especially the meat branch is in a crisis mode. I will explain later. How does it come? I mean, all countries face the same challenges these days. We have the Ukraine war, we have the high energy prices, we have COVID pandemic and all this stuff, high inflation. But in Germany, we faced some substantial changes within the last 2 years. Just to give you an idea, 2 years ago, we got a new government. Now Germany is ruled by the Democrats, by the Labour and by the Green Party. So what does it mean for us? So far, so good, but we have two key ministries. For our industry is led by the Green Party. That means, for instance, the Ministry of Economy and Trade is led by Mr. Habeck. He's also Vice Chancellor, and he leads the ministry. What does it mean? His main aim is to transform Germany into a climate-neutral country, which is resulting, for instance, in the highest energy prices in the world and other stuff. That means it has a massive impact on the meat industry and, of course, of all other industries. People already talk about the deindustrialization of Germany, which is partly true. You can see a lot of companies leaving the country and looking for better locations to produce their products. So, one point. Second point, the Ministry of Agriculture is led by Mr. Cem Özdemir, a guy with a Turkish background. The only, I don't want to say problem, is that he's a strict vegetarian. So you can imagine if the Ministry of Agriculture, Food and Consumer Protection is led by a vegetarian. I don't want to put any personal statements here, but you can imagine that this is not in favor of the meat industry, for sure. So we have these challenges to face, and yeah, this is quite tricky, and I will explain later more detailed. The German-speaking market, meat consumption, a very crucial thing these days. The meat consumption declined within the last 20 years, one can say by 8 kg. But there was only a massive drop between 21 and 22 by 4.2 kg within 1 year, which is massively, which is heavily. You see, we face extremely challenges. So, another thing, last week, for instance, the media published an internal strategy paper of the so-called German Nutritional Society. They are under the umbrella of the Agricultural Ministry, of the Green Ministry, I have to say. So, what does the German Nutritional Society? They give special dietary recommendations, and these internal paper published already shows us which way we go, because the new dietary recommendations for meat is a maximum portion of 10 gram per day. So you can imagine you have 70 gram per week, per month 300, so I'm probably on the first day of the month, I'm already exceeded my, let's say, my portion. So if I have 2 sausages, I did my job. So it's quite difficult, but I mean, we elder generations, we won't change our eating habits, but we have to bear in mind that all these papers, all these recommendations circulate in schools, in kindergartens, in university, all the dietaries get these recommendations, and it's a big challenge, I have to say. Yeah? So this will, I guess, result in a further drop in meat consumption. So, like in all other trade channels, the focus of trade is more on locally sourced meat. We talk about regional meat and other things. Appropriate husbandry, animal welfare, sustainability is mandatory for trade, and there's a strong trend towards meat substitutes. I recently joined an event in Munich. I have to say, yeah, we did blind tasting, and even some meat guys, they almost failed for some products. Yeah? It's the truth. They offered a bolognese, 2 types of bolognese, one's with meat substitutes, one's without, and 2 of them failed. So you see, it comes in certain products quite close. Okay, they also had some flank steaks which were horrible, you know. They offer even now special, what is it, special like döner with lamb taste, you know. So it's the döner, they already are able to, let's say, to create lamb or beef taste. So I think from this end, we also face quite a few challenges. Only last year, this meat substitutes increased by 25%. My colleague John said in the Netherlands it's not a big issue yet, but I feel this is also the next challenge we face. Yeah? So now I try to come to our specific products. So the self-sufficiency on lamb in Germany is approximately 50%. The lion's share comes from New Zealand, and the rest is mostly traded by Irish or UK exporters. So there are some minor countries, but they might account for 5% of the lamb. So it's also in Germany. It's not a traditional lamb country. I mean, I remember we were taught lamb is always stinky and has a bad taste. So it was still, let's say, this was prejudiced from after the war, and my grandparents taught this to my parents, and so on. No? So that's why we have a very low consumption in lamb. We have only 600 grams per head. On the other hand, we have a very strong, steadily growing Muslim community. So one can say these days we have approximately 84 million population in Germany. Amongst them, we have 6 to 8 million Muslims already. And there are statistics that show that by 2050, there will live approximately 25 million Muslims in Germany, which is a very, very large number. And I will already confirm this today, that we should concentrate more and more on halal, because I have the same feeling and I see the same things going on in Germany. You all automatically produce halal, at least if it comes to the lamb business. And even in the beef business, quite a few exporters can offer this product. So I really strongly recommend that you focus on this for the future. But in order to convey this to the market, I also strongly recommend to all exporters to have a local agent on ground, not like me, some agent who is familiar with this community. Because frankly speaking, I quite often realize this, if I try to open a market with these guys, you know this, I'm not accepted. If I come as a blonde, non-Christ, even atheist, I come there, I have not the authenticity to sell it to them. Yeah? So this is a really strong recommendations to you. Try to find a local agent with Muslim background in Germany, and then you will definitely be successful, I'm very sure. I know some companies, they go this way, some English companies, and that's the key to get a feet into the market. So yeah, Germans eat only Easter, some lamb, and Christmas. That's what I said, seasonal consumption. So if it comes to beef, as always, price is usually important for the purchase, and Germans, especially the buyers, look always for cheap meat, especially if it comes to beef. So young bulls and cows are preferred. Consumption per capita is roughly about 8 kgs per year and head. German and Irish is dominant. And last but not least, as I said, the German meat branch is in a crisis mode. Only last year, I think 9% of pork production went down and 8% of beef production within 1 year. So many people, or many farmers give up, especially against the background that they cannot earn any money with their products. Many turn into renewable energies and so on. So objectives and target groups, too low for me. Improving the image and promoting sales of English red meat in Germany. Target groups are, like always, exporters, importers, retail. Very strong focus on butcher, because we sponsored the German butcher national team 3 years back and sponsored them with British lamb. And surprisingly, they won last year the World Butcher Challenge. Nevertheless, I think it was also our impact, because we provide them with very excellent British quality lamb. So activities, we do a lot of B2B events like tastings, barbecue seminars, etc. We do cooperations with Butcher Association, cutting demonstrations. We do cooperate, as I said, with the National Butcher Team. Shows, we do the major shows like together with AHDB, Anuga, Cologne. We do Chefsache, it's a restaurant show. Igeho in Switzerland, Ziffer in Stuttgart, it's a butcher show, and Internorga, the biggest gastronomy in Germany. So King Charles just visited with Camilla in April Hamburg, and we were able to do together with the British Embassy. We supplied the lamb and the beef, and it was a fantastic event. It's a pity that I cannot present you some pictures, but it was great, and especially it works very well for your product, because Royal, it's premium, and the Germans love the Royal. So retail promotions, of course. In October, we will do a mission to UK with the National Butcher Team. One aim is to meet the British Butcher Team, the national team. I already talked to the president of the Butcher Association here, and he's also delighted if we can do something together. And I feel, because this is the group with the highest, with the highest experience and expertise in meat, and this is really very good for the British image. If we are using butchers, because they are dedicated their whole life with premium meat. So digital communication, market research are an integral part of our business. So this is what I have to say. That's it. Yeah. Thank you very much. Sorry.
Carol, now it's your turn. Good, thank you.
Thank you. Hello, let me introduce myself first. My name is Carol Dams. I be your contact for the Belgian market. Alors, something you have to know about the Belgian market. There's a particular market with 2 cultures. That's Flemish and French people. I grow in the 2 cultures. Thank you, Ma and Pa. So if you have any question about this market and this big particularity, take contact with me. Alors, what are you doing in Belgium? We work closer the wholesaler. We have more or less 3 or 4 wholesalers, and we organize it with them. Events. We develop and distribute support. We analyze the opportunity to increase the market. We make some brochure, and first time we propose a barbecue campaign to the B2B and the B2C. This one. We would like to refresh the website with new image, and we work together with the most famous chef cook in Belgium. That's the master cook. I show you one video about them.
Cette viande de qualité britannique, elle a du goût, elle a du caractère. On voit bien qu'elle a du gras. Et c'est ce gras qui va donner justement tout l'arôme à la viande en elle-même. Quand elle va rôtir, elle va fondre. Et ce qui permet justement d'avoir quelque chose de très goûteux, pas sec du tout. Effectivement, ils ont une tradition d'élevage des agneaux, tout ça, donc on voit bien que ce sont des bêtes qui broutent, qui se promènent. Alors c'est une recette gourmande et on est dans la saison.
That's an example of the video that we post on the SoMe of YouTube and you distribute to the B2B. Alors, the report to last years, we make posts and information on the Facebook page and the YouTube. We always use the websites I Love Beef and Lamb. You see some picture about them. We have more or less 390 articles and more than 30 receipts in collaboration with the Master Cook. This year we would like to increase the Instagram pages. That's the new one, and we make also, I'm sorry. No, sorry. And we make also a new look and feel for all our posts. Alors, that's the collaboration about, you see the different and most chef cook people. What we're doing, that is 3 posts per week. The best performing is pushed with the meta hats. Instagram pagina, I Love Beef and Lamb, and new we used to analyze a new canal like the Google Display Network and the LinkedIn. Alors, what's next? Now, at the moment, we try to get some interest with the barbecue program and the barbecue campaign. You will see that's different image that we use. We make a collaboration with foodie influencer and always with the association with the biggest wholesaler. We would like to make education roles, an education role for our target to understand the label, who recognize the meat, the British meat in the retailers. And the website will be coming soon with a new look and feel. I'm sorry, that's the first time that I take. Depending on the results of the new campaign, the barbecue campaign, we would like to try the winter campaign for the Christmas period. Thank you very much.
I'm going to, as I said earlier, Lewis isn't with us today because he's delivering some activity, some long-planned activity. So we're going to hear from Lewis virtually.
Good morning to everybody. My name is Luis Garcia. I am the AHDB agent for Portugal. Sorry not to be with you today, but I'm going to do a presentation regarding the status of the current export program for Portugal. Starting with beef, it is a small market with less than 16 kilos per capita. Imports represent 78% of consumption, also due to the fact that the product livestock is half of the production being exported. Retail represents 30% of total market, and both picanha and maminha are the key cuts for the UK because the demand is high and the price is good. Here, imports represent 75% of consumption. Again, for the same reason, 75% of the production is exported. UK sourcing represents about 2,000 tons. And the market is characterized as traditional, buys carcasses on festive periods, and more recently, through GNIPA, the leading importer, we have been offering skin pack items, which we have supported. Key issue is trying to promote products which, unfortunately for the moment, supply is scarce. In 2020, we started Beef Lovers website to promote UK beef and lamb and to provide information to the consumer. Through social media, Facebook, we bring consumers to the website, we build a community of lovers, and we try to boost offline market promotions and activities. Targets for these activities to reach 25,000 followers at the end of 23, being close to the leader, which is Carne Alentejana. We are lagging 8,000 in terms of likes, but we are much ahead in terms of interactions per post. Also, we need to be effective in terms of cost per click and interactions. We are running 10 to 12 posts per month, and the objective of campaigns is reach, traffic, and interactions. Sonai Lamb project started 21. Sonai is the leading retailer, but number 2 in meat. Main objective is to improve the lamb butchery business and its attractiveness to the consumer. Key elements defined jointly with us were to teach butchers how to take the best value of the carcass, to redesign the lamb corner by expanding the offer and layout, and to provide service to the consumer, facilitating decision-making process. On January 22, we brought Martin Eccles to do a tutorial section. We organized a seminar including Martin, the chef's cooking and the nutritional speech. We have produced a tutorial video, but the project was halted because of management change in July. Only in 23 February we continued, but changed the approach through compensated 4 quarters, vacuum packed subcuts through NIPA importer again. We suggested a leaflet with receipts to facilitate decision making. That was approved, but the project is on hold because of the current prices and supply situation. The components of the project are the consumer leaflet design. You can see on the right hand side the mock-up. We want to develop new receipts tailored for some of the subcuts with our chef this month, and do some video photo shooting for the leaflet and the digital marketing. And then we design a consumer promo to trigger the purchase and to bring the consumers to our landing Facebook page. The third project we are taking is the bringing Hereford to the Portuguese market through meat trading. Meat trading developed Fortuna, a truly innovative and first-class packaged brand, to sell their premium cuts. We brought them in November to the UK to do some sourcing of beef, and we suggested them to look at Hereford as a differentiated approach than to the meat to Angus, which everyone is doing. Source of Hereford was identified using skin packs with sleeves, identifying the UK origin, but we have to stop the project now because there is no Hereford meat. A set of materials were produced, from sleeve design with QR code, commercial leaflet to the sales force, the integration of the communication in their website, outer cartons designed for this. Project got already new listings in Ocean Macro and will support through our Beef Lovers website with news and Facebook posts, and also through Observador leading magazine to write an article. Last but not the least is sponsoring of the Chefs Congress, which is the most important culinary in Portugal, where all the top chefs participate. Last year's edition ran for 2 days and hosted 73 speakers and more than 1,000 visitors. That goes through presentations, cook demos, roundtables, interviews, homage tastings, and the like. It was promoted through their newsletter, social media, and the press. Major sponsors are Macro, Bonduel, and Express. The sponsorship for us, the rationale to sponsor this event to take place in September 23 is a way to gain visibility for UK lamb in Eureka and explore a potential relationship with Macro being the main sponsor. The activities being taken now is to produce a flyer that will be delivered during the event, to identify a supplier of prepacked cuts for the event, which is already identified and which will capitalize on the future sales. identify an importer which is in the way to deliver to macro, and explore then this new supply chain to the HoReCa sector. The launch event to the press will take place on the 22nd of June, and it will have the participation of famous chefs cooking the UK lambs. Then we'll provide awareness to our sponsoring of the Chefs Congress through Facebook, and UK Meat is sponsoring is printed in all promotion vehicles. Goodbye from sunny Portugal. All the best for your conference.
That's Luis from Portugal, and you saw there that the reason he's not here because he's got a lamb event on, so that's great. Let's hope that's been successful. The final speaker to finish up our tour of Europe is Marek, who's going to talk about Poland.
Thank you very much, Phil. My name is Marek Szabel, and I represent AHDB in Poland and Eastern Europe. I've been working with AHDB since 2014, when we launched lamb into the market. It was the first time that British lamb had been introduced to the market. And we built up the business literally from scratch, reaching a sort of a high point before Brexit of being the #1 country, importer into Poland, ahead of New Zealand, ahead of Ireland. Obviously, since Brexit, things have been different, which I'll cover here. Focus has also been on lamb because Poland is such a major producer of beef. There are substantial imports into the country from the UK, but it is lower value beef. Right. So, background to really the strategy, and I'm just going to cover where we are now, not where we were before. And it has been driven literally with the volatility of supply of British beef and lamb to Poland post-Brexit, COVID. It has actually been tough. We've lost listings in Biedronka, which is the largest retailer in Poland. It's got over 10% of the market. We also lost Carrefour, Lidl, and Auchan. And this was largely because we had promotions planned, scheduled, and then last minute we didn't get supply from the UK, which you can do once, but you can't do it a second time, because otherwise we won't get back into those retailers again. So we've had to now focus on rebuilding these relations and confidence with customers to ensure that we've got continuity of supply. Macro we lost last year, and this was actually a real shame. It was a major customer for over 7 years, and this was largely to board beer. But what we have been doing is regaining some sales through in-out promotions. These are safe for the retailers because basically it's a fixed period of time, product goes in, product goes out, and that has been happening in some of the major retailers, Auchan, Carrefour, and Biedronka. But ironically, with all the economics right now, Poland's got 13% inflation at the moment. The issue with lamb is not price, it's continuity of supply. That is the biggest fear that retailers have, that if they put a product on shelf and people start buying because there is now a core consumer buying lamb, and if they don't have continuity of supply, they lose those customers. And actually then British lamb is replaced with something else. So one of the things that has now happened, and actually that is part of our strategy, is the largest importer of British lamb in Poland has invested in cutting equipment and particularly state-of-the-art packing machines, skin packs, which then allows them to bring in bigger elements and actually pack for retail, particularly steaks, lamb chops, etc., and supply from the local market. So the marketing plan is actually based on where we are right now. So we're preparing now a new presenter for Poland and for the region. And this is with these retail packs that we can actually have packed locally. Obviously, the larger elements like leg, shoulder, etc., are still imported directly from the UK on mainly in-out promotions. And these are added value meat products then ready for distribution. Now, we're also researching, and this is actually all background stuff, so this is not something that visually you'd see, but we are now rebuilding databases of buyers regionally. But buyers regionally also means we're testing the shelf life of product packed in Poland. Once we can get up to importing carcasses, obviously we can extend the shelf life a bit longer than we can from importing just larger elements. So we've got B2B campaigns that we're working on right now to target buyers with a new product offer. And with that then generating sales leads. So we are going back into markets that we actually lost after Brexit. The Czech Republic, we had continuous promotions with Albert, that is part of the Ahold group. And after Brexit, we haven't been able to service them. Largely because they weren't taking, they don't take full truckloads, and now we do know it's a full truckload business. Obviously, we take pallets from, be it Holland or Belgium, into the market, but we would like to get back into full truckload business. So supporting retail and HoReCa via targeted promotional campaigns, social media activity, and also developing added value meat products that actually can utilize the full carcass. Which then help with the whole supply chain, transport and delivery. So some of the things that we do and we continue doing, trade shows, now under Food is Great. This is the largest international trade show in Warsaw. It is pretty well attended by all industry, mainly retail. So that's mainly retail. We also attend and have stands at HoReCa shows. So these are HoReCa here, which is the food service industry. And then the main focus there is really building a database of restaurants and chefs that we can actually work with and as customers. We also do training videos. We brought over a master butcher from the UK. We filmed that. We put it on our channel, and we're amazed that we've actually had over 9,000 views, which is of a cutting video, which is actually purely for professionals. So it's purely for chefs and retail buyers. Some of the social media activities we do, we run a number of pages. One is a consumer page, Food is Great. This is actually something I developed when I was still delivery partner for DBT in Poland for bringing in food and drink from the UK. And we've stayed with that. And this is a page, we've got about 15,000 active fans. So we've got constant posts on there. And they do have actually very good traction because it's a core base. We have a site, a web page for professionals under a Queen's brand that we developed, which is actually a consumer-facing brand. The page is called Wybieram Restaurację, which basically means I choose restaurants. So this is where we interact with chefs, with restaurant managers. We do training through this as well. We have videos, and they share videos with us as well of what they're preparing with lamb and beef. So here's a professional site. We've got over 2,500 followers amongst professionals. We also have a content-driven website for both consumers and chefs, and largely we work with recipes from AHDB site in the UK, but we also have videos prepared by chefs that we put on here. So this is a constantly growing site. We've got nutritional and health values on beef and lamb. And we also have a store location finder. So when we run promotions, we actually put them onto that store location finder so people can see where that promotion is running and where can they buy the product. So this is actually the facility that this importer has developed, and equipment that they've invested in, for both lamb and beef. Latest technology skin packing machine. So it's a fair size investment for an importer, and this is actually quite a game changer for the market. Because now with this, there's just the belief that we can actually be supplying these sort of cuts without having upheavals from UK supply issues. So these are products now that are being packed in Poland. This is literally from this month, so they only got the veterinary certificate this month. So this is as fresh as can be. So this now will actually take us into a different stage, but it also means that it's the first time we'll be able to sell beef steaks in the marketplace, which is something we haven't been able to do up until now. So this is a game changer from that perspective as well. And to add on top of all of this, to then literally utilize all elements of the carcass, we've developed, and this is actually sort of taking innovation into a different space. We developed a range of pierogis. Pierogis are Polish dumplings. You may know them in the UK. Gourmet pierogis with lamb. So we've got traditional flavors, we've then got exotic flavors, and we've also got a range of beef pierogis. And the idea with this is that, we use trimmings for this, which then takes us and places us on a different shelf in a retailer than the traditional meat shelf. It also means we can go into exports, because these have 60-day shelf life. So not only exports in the local market, but we've already got interest beyond sort of our region. There is a second stage to this that we'll be developing, because there is the opportunity, and particularly with lamb, following on discussions today with halal, is to develop a halal range. But it does mean then the producer will need to invest, obviously, in a separate production line, chilling, etc. But that is somewhere on the horizon. So what we're really doing is relaunching. We're relaunching of a base post-Brexit and looking into all the markets which are part of the EU, 100 million plus people in the region. But with the products that we have now, we are potentially looking at going a bit further. Thank you very much.
Okay, right. So it's great when you work with the professionals that we've worked with this afternoon. We've landed exactly on time for both sessions, so thank you to our speakers for being so diligent on that. I'm going to sum up very briefly. I'm going to start with a couple of caveats, and they both come from the halal session, something I don't want you to leave the room with thinking that we endorse this as AHDB. Lord Trees told us when we all consume and enjoy New Zealand lamb, that's not a message from AHDB. Alex, you're most welcome. And Arwell promoted multiple wives, again, not an AHDB policy. So please don't leave the room with that in mind. What I do recommend and endorse is that you spend some time reading this booklet, because this sets out our new kind of re-energised focus on exports. You, the levy payer, told us last year that that's a priority for you, both processor and farmer levy payers. So I hope today what you've seen is an example of the breadth of work we do. I'm sure no matter how close you are to us as an export team and an organisation, there's some new things that you've picked up there today, and I hope that's given you some appetite for the thought process. Take a moment to take a picture of that as well for the direct contacts. So do consider what you've heard today and reach out to the team to talk about your own specific interests. And you heard, particularly in the European session, but a plea from Susanna earlier this morning as well about do continue to support us on those in and outward missions, on providing products for international events, because that's where we get our most traction, when consumers and trade overseas can actually sample the products and experience what we have to offer with the story that we can tell. That's when we're most successful. So we've had an excellent full programme with some great speakers and some fabulous content, and I hope that's got you thinking. We've heard particularly around opportunities globally in all the markets we've touched on, the importance, the growing importance that halal is going to play. And Christine Middlemiss talked in detail about the challenges for disease, borders and barriers and what that may mean to the industry. So we need to be ever vigilant and mindful of that, whilst also seeking further access. We need to make sure that we are in the best position to protect and maintain our own markets. And then kind of wrapping up, that's been a showcase of what we as the export team offer to you, our levy payers. But of course, we don't do that in isolation. So I want to thank the support of our government colleagues that are here, DBT, DEFRA, great team, and the other government departments that are fundamental in supporting this work. Lorna's at the back as an ag attaché. Will was on the video. This is a big team effort. We've got Marcus and Martin in the audience from the UK Export Certification Partnership. And also the support of you, our levy payers. This is all for you, effectively. This is how we invest the levy money that you and the farmer levy payer provide us with, to provide that insight and intelligence, that data-driven approach, the markets that we target, the work that we do and the activity that we undertake. And I think today has been a fabulous example. It certainly makes me proud to stand up here today and hear the team talk with such passion about the things they do. So I'm just going to pause while you give a rapturous round of applause for our export team. And our other colleagues that support the work we do, Market Insight, our comms team, our events team that I think you'll agree have put on a fabulous event here today. So thanks particularly to Kat, who sat quietly at the back, but in the run-up to this has no doubt sent you lots of emails advising you where you should be and at which time. And thank you to the 5 people that read those. That was great. We had lots of calls yesterday about what time again? Where is it? So that was good. I'm just going to finish up by saying again, you know, we appreciate the support. This is a collaborative effort. We use the information you provide us. We use a broad range of information sources to drive this programme, and we use your levy investment to do so. We want it to be meaningful. We want it to make a difference to your business. Reach out to the team directly to tell them what you're most interested in. Get involved in the programme. Susanna flagged up the Great Yorkshire Show, for example. And Nuga's coming up. The closer we're aligned, the more we can do together for greater success. So thank you for your attendance. Thank you for your engagement. And we look forward to seeing you again somewhere soon. Thanks very much.